ESPN finally took it too far, and the Big 12 is moving part of its football product to a new network. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Baylor crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Baylor crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Cameron Stewart covering all things Baylor Bears with Locked On Baylor. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. We will start. It was Joe Tessitore to every other analyst on ESPN talking about the Big 12 in the last few weeks, waxing poetic about the opponents and never talking about this conference and what it means to football. And now the Big 12 will start moving games to TNT. We'll start there and then talk Baylor and BYU will meet in the Big 12 championship next season. That's Cameron Stewart's prediction. Also, the Big 12 just robbed a quarterback from the SEC. His name is Walker White. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Cam, let's start with that Arizona State and Texas game. You would think that a bunch of ragtag boys like Arizona State would have no business being on that football field the way that ESPN treated them. And this is a trend that dates back at the very least to 2021 when the conference sent a cease and desist to ESPN for tampering with conference affiliations. And since then, this league has gotten no respect.
Dude, I thought when you were saying at the beginning, like, Tessitore didn't say anything about the Big 12. It's like, no, he just hyped it up like it was the state championship game in Hoosiers. Like, here are these farm boys. No one has given them a chance. Meanwhile, in the back of his head, it's like Tim Robinson being like, we're all trying to figure out who didn't give them a chance. And it's like, it literally felt like it was this David versus Goliath when Texas was a better team. But it's like, yeah, we did play football, major college football here for a couple of months here. You just don't care enough. Tessitore, there's two things that he loves. Second is the SEC. First is Joe Tessitore. And so it just made for perfect theater that he made out Arizona State to be like a 6-man Texas high school football team taking on the mighty Longhorns.
Came out in the middle of this season that TNT and the Big 12 had inked a deal for basketball and football both. So going away from ESPN Plus toward TNT, that's the network that carried the biggest games in the NBA, the biggest games of March Madness, and now they have the Big 12 conference. Feels like this league is trying to push away, but to me, the biggest issue, guess who controls the college football playoff and the committee, and that's not good.
See, that's the ultimate problem of it. Right? Like in most other times in college football history, you go away from Network X, in this case ESPN, that does, kind of change the power divide a little bit. And it still does in a certain extent in 2025, because, we always talk about with conference realignment and everything, it's all about where the money's going. And in this case, the money's going away from ESPN, and therefore, in a way, money kind of going away from the SEC because ESPN's getting less power and yada, yada. But at the end of the day, in 2025, we all watched it play out in real time in 2024. Like, they pull the strings on everything that happens in the college football playoff. The rankings are revealed on their network. All the pregame, all the halftime stuff, it's all about the college football playoff, which is on their network. And it really felt like it wasn't the people, the Mac Rhodeses and the athletic directors meeting up in Grapevine at the Gaylord. Yeah. It was just Reese Davis and Joey Galloway and Kirk Herbstreit and Paul Feinbaum and whomever they were putting on ESPN. And that was going to be the final say. It felt like that the whole time. There's never been a time, I don't think, where a network has had more power over like literally the integrity of the sport, be it who is going to the playoff, who is going to get ranked where, than what ESPN has right now in college football. I don't think it's even close.
When's the last time you turned on First Take?
I should have on Monday to see what they said about Fox Sports, but I knew it wasn't going to be anything. Brother, outside of a dentist's office or a gym, which it's been a while, I have not willingly turned on an ESPN program that wasn't a live sports game in years. Years. It's all it is. You just get coaxed into it. You're just at the doctor's office. Bam. It's on. First take, baby. Hope you like Stephen A.
Yeah. Or you're at 5 o'clock happy hour at the Mexican restaurant. You're like, PTI is still a thing. Didn't know that.
Yes. Or it's on in the ESPN Central Texas studios and Matt Mosley's on a 20-minute rant. You haven't talked in 3 segments and it's just on there.
And it's on. There really is at this point. No, it feels like very little integrity from the 4 letters and nothing on the network that I would want to turn on. The layman would want to turn on and watch when it comes to their sports coverage, college sports coverage. That was different 15 years ago when we had 5 conferences that were all pretty well spread out. College football felt like a fair and open landscape. And now to make matters worse, the belle of the ball is the SEC, and ESPN, who has killed the MLB, who has killed the NBA, just grabbed its little grubby fingers all over the SEC. And it feels like now a year into this experiment, they're going to carry the SEC to the finish line no matter what.
Absolutely. And I thought about this the other day to kind of that point you were just talking about. It used to be, college football has never been like an even playing field, not in our lifetimes, not for a long time. But then again, growing up, it was a certain amount of programs that had control over the sport and the championships in the sport. And what it has really diverged into is 1.5 conferences, right? The SEC and the top half of the Big Ten. That's all it is. And so it wasn't an even playing field anyway, but when you tip the scales towards specifically the SEC, it's never going to be that way again. And they pound the chest on, the SEC was always getting the best players for a long time now. And they had great coaches and they have great programs. But now, without trying to sound too whiny, it almost just it's not even a fair fight anymore, because not only do they probably have the best players and coaches and programs, but the only sources of college football that are nationally regulated on ESPN are telling you that they have the best players, the best coaches, the best programs. So you don't have a choice. It's a group think now.
They've doubled down on branding and maybe branding and marketing have maybe they have put in our minds that the SEC is king. It just means more, right? That the slogan, everybody knows the slogan, but last year, no SEC team in the national championship. This year, there will be no SEC team in the national championship. We're going on.
You barely snuck one into the Final Four. You had to hook or by crook sneak one into the Final Four here. And yet no one's talking about, boy, the SEC didn't deserve to be here. SMU really didn't deserve to be here, but Tennessee, of course they did. What's the problem there? Anyway.
Yeah, it's become insufferable because of that league. And as someone who grew up in Arkansas fan, an SEC fan, I've been at the games and chanted SEC. I've also been at Baylor football games where they've chanted SEC at the University of Texas or against Oklahoma. And I am aware. I feel like we're all kind of aware that this isn't fair in college athletics, and the Big 12 is making a move to get away from it by going to TNT with its football product, going to TNT with its basketball product. I think overall, while it's going to hurt you with the inside traders of the College Football Playoff Committee, it is the right move long term. Coming up, Big 12 championship, way too early prediction. Cameron Stewart fingers the pulse on a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Baylor crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is where I can go to see that tickets to go to the Notre Dame game in Miami aren't very expensive because Game Time has the best prices guaranteed. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff has never been easier. It's never really existed until now, but attending the playoff in general has never been easier. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks and makes getting tickets for events even easier. Filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals. I recently used Game Time Picks to find those tickets in Miami. Okay, Miami flights are pretty cheap too. I can just go to a playoff game for this. All right. The on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guaranteed gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, and that is guaranteed. Cam, you sent me a text this week talking about transfer portal where Baylor sits right now and other teams in the Big 12. Your way too early projections next season featured A very interesting matchup in the Big 12 title. I'll get to Baylor in a second where you can explain why you think the Bears will be there. But BYU in Arlington is your pick. Why, as of today, I mean, there's plenty of time to change it, but why, as of today, do you have the Cougars making it to the title against the Bears?
Man, I love their trajectory over the last few years. I really like the defense first style. And I don't think we've seen the best from Jake Retzlaff yet. Because I was a guy who was really hyping up Rocco Becht coming into this year, and I like Rocco Becht, and he had a solid season, and he got his team to the Big 12 championship game. There's not much that separates Rocco Becht from Jake Retzlaff, all right? Not a lot at all, if anything. And so I see that kind of Iowa State mold that finally broke through and got back to the Big 12 championship this year and finally won 10 games for like the first time ever. That mold, I think, is what's going to win long-term in the Big 12. Arizona State was built a lot from that as well. Like Arizona State kind of found their footing offensively in the back half of the season. And that's why they beat Iowa State. That's why they were a deserving Big 12 champion, because they have more firepower than the Cyclones. But it's kind of starting with that defensive base. And BYU's been building that the last really kind of the back end of the 23 season, where they almost got the bowl contention, and then all throughout 24. And I'll give you a little sneak peek for why I picked both these teams, because the way I love looking at this is, okay, especially in a great race like the Big 12, if the season were a week or two longer, who would have been there? And I think Baylor would have been there. And I think, if not BYU, then Colorado would have been there, and Colorado loses a lot more than BYU does. Is that good enough? You like that?
In that bowl game, the Colorado BYU bowl game didn't give me a lot of confidence in the Buffs compared to a BYU, especially if we're talking trajectory. The Baylor Bears, I mean, we can get more into how the transfer portal plays into this, but the Baylor Bears, why Baylor in the Big 12 title next year, aside from the fact that you are the host of Locked On Baylor?
Well, objectively speaking, they were probably the best Big 12 team the last, I don't know, let's use an arbitrary number here, 6 weeks of the regular season. How about that? How about the last 6 games of the regular season? If they weren't the best team in the Big 12, they were certainly on the medal stand. And they bring a ton of important positions back. They need some help at receiver, but with an offense in place with Jake Spavital, that's, I don't want to say just purely plug and play, like it's just a system type thing, but it's an attractive system for good receivers to come into and to thrive in. I think they could well have the best quarterback in the conference returning in Sawyer Robertson. If Cam Scatterbu goes to the NFL draft, they probably have the best running back returning in the conference in Bryson Washington. And Dave Aranda is shaking up this defense, which it probably needed a little bit earlier. But he's fired some guys this week, which we do talk about on Locked On Baylor today. And so clearly they're trying to shore up that side of things. They've brought in some plug-and-play starters through the transfer portal. Obviously, I know Baylor and their dealings a little bit more intimately than some of the other teams. But again, I go back to that model. Back up the championship game 2 weeks. Who's going to be there? Doesn't mean anything for 24, but it might just mean something for 25. And I think Baylor would have been there. They were the hottest team in the league at the time. And they bring back probably the most in terms of skill positions, probably a little bit more than a team like Kansas State, Arizona State.
Let's talk schedule, because Unlocked on Big 12, always fun to mention as many Big 12 teams as possible and their outlook next season. For BYU, Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina. That's not a very hard non-conference. That's a pretty easy walk your way, especially with that Stanford game being at home. Walk your way to 3-0. Then home games against Utah, West Virginia, TCU, UCF. 2 of those teams are going through coaching changes, UCF and West Virginia. One of them being Utah, had a lot of roster turnover. You stole a couple of their guys in the offseason. And then West Virginia, or I should say TCU, seems to be a pretty deadly team next year. Provo, a tough place to play. You go on the road against Arizona. They're not very good. Colorado, we don't know what they look like without Shedeur Sanders. At Iowa State is tough. At Texas Tech is tough. At Cincinnati should be a win for the Cougars. That's at least a 9-3. I say at least.
Could be, yeah.
Or it could be lower, but that's a pretty solid 9-3, 10-2, 11-1 for BYU based off of just what they did this season.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to spoil the back half of this, but BYU, according to the 2024 win percentage, you take out the FCS teams because that's a different story, 13th toughest schedule in the Big 12. There's only 16 teams in the Big 12. Yeah. Their schedule is 13th.
Is that good or bad? That's not.
It's not great. It's good for them.
And what we know is that today in college football, as long as you go 12-0, you're going to be fine. Just go 12-0. It doesn't matter who you
just
beat.
Don't lose a single game in the power conference. Yeah.
The games, we talk about road game at Iowa State. That's tough. At Texas Tech, they could be very, very much in the hunt for a Big 12 championship. But for Baylor, they avoid BYU. Mm-hmm. Baylor avoids
until Arlington.
Until Arlington. Baylor avoids Texas Tech next season. Your non-conference, though, is tough. Auburn and SMU. Let's take a second and camp out right there. There's a real chance that Baylor starts the season 0-2 and still finishes 8-4. Still has a very good football team, but that is an insane way to open up in August against the Tigers of Auburn and then at SMU.
Yeah, it's a great way to open up, I think. And I'm not like in my bed at night terrified of Auburn. I think they're a good team. I think they'll be better than they were this past year for sure. And I'm glad you faced them week 1 instead of week 2. So that they don't play, Samford, who Baylor plays week 3, and just figures it out and comes into McLean with all kinds of confidence because SMU is going to be SMU. They're going to be confident. They just went to the college football playoff. So Auburn at home, I like that you're playing them in week 1. And I think Baylor's still probably going to have a better team, if we're being honest. But we know how Baylor does, in terms of playing down to their competition. And then SMU on the road. You've seen that stadium, Drake. We've called high school games in bigger stadiums than that, man. It's not like
stadium more
field advantage.
Lack thereof, you could say.
I mean, look, SMU's a really good team. I don't want to kind of poo on them for that, but it's not like you're going into this really tough road environment. I mean, it's not quite as easy as going into Houston, but it's not going into Provo or even Stillwater on a good day.
Then the conference schedule on the road against bottom end of the Big 12 in 2024, Arizona, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. Those are all, you're licking your chops. You go at TCU. That's a tough game. Obviously, you come back home over the course of next year to play Houston, UCF. They're both question marks. Utah, question mark. Arizona State without Cam Scatterbo might even be a question mark. And then Kansas State. What do you make of the conference slate for the Bears?
It's the 15th easiest schedule in the conference, 15th out of 16, which is awesome. But I mean, obviously from a fan standpoint, like I hate that we're not playing Tech. And if you just look at the home games, it actually leaves a lot to be desired from a fan standpoint, right? Like you have one in-state game and it's Houston for home games. Like that kind of stinks. That's not going to bring a lot of juice to the place, but it also means you won't be playing as a road team in McLean Stadium at any point during the year. So obviously the Utah matchup is going to be big if it's early in the year. And Arizona State, I'm really excited to see when that falls in, because I do think Arizona State isn't going to have a steep fall off. I think they are going to be competing for the conference championship next year as well. So that could be a really fun statement game. And if it's late in the season and they're both doing well, that could be kind of a tune-up that Baylor needs before a potential Big 12 championship or a potential college football playoff game.
Coming up, the Big 12 robbed the SEC of a quarterback on a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Baylor crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 app right now to make your bets this NFL playoff and college football playoff season. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need to live bet. You have same-game parlays, and so much more. I go to the site, I see that Texas is a 5.5-point underdog against Ohio State, and I believe that Ohio State will win that game by a touchdown. Boop. That's it. Just type in the little numbers right there, and you can bet that on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. The Big 12 just robbed the SEC of a blue chip quarterback, the Little Rock, Arkansas native Walker White, who chose Auburn out of high school as a borderline five-star depending on who you ask, and now he's a Baylor Bear.
Mm-hmm. How about the number 3 dual threat quarterback in the class when he came out of high school? So
pretty good.
It might need to be a composite 5-star, but we're talking about a top 5 guy as a dual threat, which is more than one threat, Drake. So to me, that pretty much projects as one of the best quarterback recruits in America. And this is a big get for Baylor. He's not going to start next year. In fact, he probably won't see a ton of time because they bring back Sawyer Robertson, who I think is the best returning quarterback in the conference. But it gives him an avenue to know, hey, I'm going to be the starter in 26, almost certainly. I'm going to go and learn under this guy the same way that Sawyer Robertson did in 2023 and became one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 after that. So you come in, you play, again, an exciting Jake Spavital offense, one that's going to let you sling it quite a bit. And lest we forget, Baylor was on his list like in the final 5 when it came to his initial college decision. In fact, the final 3, it was Clemson, Auburn, and Baylor. They were pretty late to the party. This was the Novosad debacle, and they had to kind of get in on some 2024 quarterbacks. And I was worried when his name came up that he would go to Houston because of the Sean Bell connection. But it turns out he's just a big Baylor guy. Just a big Baylor guy.
I had Austin Novosad on Locked On Baylor twice. And he looked me in the eye and said, I can't wait to be a Baylor Bear. And has he gotten a snap? Has he gotten a snap at Oregon? What does this say about the SEC? You took a 97 rated player. He will be the second highest rated recruit in Baylor football history from a quarterback standpoint, at least. What does this say about the SEC that a school like Auburn just lost him?
I think it's bigger than SEC fans realize. Because, you know how this works. There will be Auburn fans that will say, oh, I wasn't really our future. We love Deuce Knight, and Deuce Knight's one of the biggest recruits they've ever gotten. So maybe there's some truth to that. But when this thing started, I thought I had the ESPN thought of like, yeah, but there are SEC teams looking for quarterbacks too, looking for young quarterbacks, quarterback depth. I'm talking schools like Alabama and Ole Miss. And, Georgia might be looking for one now with Jaden Rashada out. So there was certainly some interest from the SEC. We didn't hear about it because Walker White wasn't one of those guys who, tweeted out every place that he got an offer and interest from. But certainly there would have been some SEC schools being like, hey, Walker, you can go be Baylor's backup or you can come be Ole Miss's backup with Lane Kiffin. And so to know that, to have that context and have him pick Baylor is big for obviously our program and for the Big 12, because if this kid comes in and stars, it's going to prove that, hey man, you can come into this conference and make a real name for yourself. Because again, let's point to the guy who's starting over him this year. Sawyer Robertson started in the SEC. He was a backup in the SEC, one of the biggest recruits Mississippi State had ever gotten. And he doesn't see much time there, much like Walker White at Auburn. He comes into a school like Baylor, and now he's got a real shot. Like Sawyer Robertson will go into next year with some Heisman hype if he plays well early in the season against those big opponents. And if Baylor wins 10 games, they're in the college football playoff discussion. And that's not a crazy leap. I know there are people who will be thinking that. It's not a crazy leap. And so Walker White sees that blueprint and could set a blueprint himself for SEC or Big Ten guys that think, I'm 4 or 5 stars out of high school, I got to go to the SEC. Whereas you look at a success story like Sawyer Robertson's or possibly Walker White's, or I don't know, the Heisman Trophy winners, and you say, I can make a name for myself in this conference and we can win big things in this conference.
Cam Skattebo.
Move up, but yeah.
Move up, but there are other guys. There are guys who moved around that I would use as examples showing that the Big 12 is attracting the best athletes from the FCS or the mid-major level. And as you mentioned, the best athletes from the SEC level. You're getting the best of both worlds in the Big 12, it's like a purgatory, a transfer portal purgatory. Okay, you didn't get yours at an SEC school. come here, come compete, former 5-star. You're still just as athletic. Utilize this conference as a vessel. And hey, you were the best player at North Dakota State last year. Come be the starting linebacker at Kansas State, or come be the starting linebacker at Texas Tech.
Or, you're a JUCO tackle machine at linebacker, Keaton Thomas. You wanted to prove to people that you could play Power 4. How about you now come to us and be an all Big 12 linebacker year one? Yeah. It's all over. It happens every year, man. You look up that all Big 12 list or look at those guys playing in the Big 12 championship game, and their fingerprints are all over it, this blueprint that we're talking about.
Money. How much it seems like Baylor's got a lot of it. How much of this is money when it comes to not just Walker White, but the transfer portal additions in general for the Bears?
I think
they didn't necessarily have to outbid an SEC team, but the money was at least comparable, if not outbidding SEC schools that wanted White.
Yes, and I think what it comes down to with everyone in the Baylor transfer portal is that it's not like a huge percentage of the decision, like a massive percentage of the decision went into money, because Baylor's not handing out a couple $1,000,000 like some of these other schools are. But I think Baylor having a sign of intent of like, yeah, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you $500,000. Yeah. Like, come in, because they are getting those guys who are making those next steps up. I mean, guys from, Alabama doesn't count with Kobe Prentice, but Fresno State and FIU. And I talk about Keaton Thomas from JUCO, or Ashton Hawkins, their third leading receiver from Texas State. These guys where you say you're not making any money there. We're going to show that we want you to come play. We can't offer you $1,000,000, but we can offer you $400,000. You're not getting that at Texas State or whatever the number is, right? You can come in here and star, and yes, we will show you that we want you here by paying you. And they certainly did it with a starting quarterback this year that didn't work in DeQuan Finn. The numbers I heard were nearing $1,000,000. And so it is something where it's definitely a part of it. You can't sit here and say it's not a part of it, but Dave Aranda certainly has an impact in terms of the relationships that he and his coaches make with these players. And now you throw in a money aspect too, and a promise that, hey, we can win some games, unlike a couple of years ago. It certainly helps. So yeah, you're not going to win a bidding war against the SEC powers. Baylor's not there. In fact, there are very few teams in the Big 12 that I think can do that. But the commitment to actually going towards NIL. And that's the same for schools like TCU and Oklahoma State as well.
I'll leave you with this.
Please.
DeQuan Finn. Which is probably the best way that I can ask that question.
Yeah. This is not a knock, but his best place is probably somewhere like the MAC, where he's going again. He's the MAC Player of the Year. It was something that, in terms of optics, Baylor probably needed to do. Like, I do sympathize with this. They're coming off a 3-9 season. The quarterback leaves. I don't think not just the fans, but the coaching staff knew what they had in Sawyer Robertson at that point. And it was like, you need to go out and get a guy that can lead this team and give some excitement to the fans and the donors, and saying that this is going to get better. We got this kind of guy, again, he's not coming from the SEC, but I give you the MAC Player of the Year. I give you this pretty cool highlight tape and we pay him $700,000 to come here. Like, that's probably something like that needed to happen. And unfortunately, out of it, I think they probably needed to start him at the beginning of the year because of that price tag. But I guess it's all's well that ends well, truly, with finding out that Sawyer Robertson is a legit awesome quarterback.
He's good at what he does. It was his mom's birthday recently. I want to wish her a happy birthday, the entire family. Hope they had a fun and safe birthday. My birthday
Get
month
you a hog hat.
Is in January.
The whole family a hog hat.
The Blind Side.
Yep.
Turns out they were not great people. They were not great people.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, I believe when they filmed that, Nutt was the head coach at Ole Miss.
Yes.
But
right? Yeah.
It was Ed Orgeron who had, and I believe he may have been fired by the time the movie was released. Ed Orgeron had to wear the Ole Miss shirt because for historical accuracy, and Nick Saban was in an LSU shirt. That's crazy.
People forget.
Lou Holtz, South Carolina.
Which real feathers.
in the movie. And is it Pat Dye?
No, it's probably Tuberville at Auburn.
Is it Tuberville?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He was the coach in 04 when they were undefeated.
That feels right. Wow.
That's Senator Tuberville to you.
What a cast of characters. And then, yeah, that's it. That's all.
Tommy Tuberville and Craig James, the only Republicans that could lose in Lubbock.
That's Cameron Stewart. I was telling somebody the other day about the time that Mike Leach put that guy in the closet.
Craig James' son, yes. Yes.
It's just like, you got a concussion? I don't know. Put him in a closet for 12 hours. Just
get. And I imagine like 30 seconds later, he turns around from the drill. Are you not in the damn closet yet? Why are you here not in the closet?
Yeah, kid.
Oh, man. Love with Mike Leach, man.
Like, we gotta fire him now, right? Like, yeah, we probably have to be putting.
Leach comes into the office. He's like, for what? The closet thing? Really?
Concussed. He's got to go to a dark room.
I'm just trying to help the kid out. God, I love Mike Leach, man.
At Real Cameron Stewart, or subscribe with Locked On Baylor wherever you find your podcast and on YouTube. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A Locked On Baylor and Locked On Dose Grande crossover.